Hi, my name is Chantal Comeau, and today's pedagogical capsule is on narrative writing. So as we can see here, a couple of details to get us started. Most of you know that narrative writing is telling a story. However, there are some things that we can work on that we can specify. These are usually the most often asked questions that we get in class. So it simply means telling a story, which we kind of know already. One question that we often get is, does it need to be in the third person form or does it need to be in the first person form? And we will accept either in grade 9 English at École Mathieu. So if there's another requirement, your teacher can explain what adjustments would need to be made. Third person form simply means that you would use the names of people, meaning that you are not in the story belongs to someone else. And you would say, when Mia goes to the store, she does this. When Leonard went on the cruise, he thought that. So you are not in the story. However, if you would like to include yourself, you can. So if you are retelling something that happened to you, your proudest moment, your most embarrassing moment, maybe it's easier for you to say I, which you can do and we will accept. This would mean you would say I and we, which is completely fine. Another question that we usually get, does it need to be true or does it need to be fake? There's no way, and we will not be verifying such. However, if it is believable and it seems true, then you are good to go, and that's what we need to do. The last thing is, I often hear people say, we've been telling stories since grade 2 or grade 3. We're good at this. People tend to be overconfident. I guess, warning to you would be to make sure that it is not a list of events. For example, here's something to not do. Do not do this. I got on a cruise. There were 3 swimming pools. The surfing was fun. The meals were wonderful. I had pizza. To conclude, going on a cruise is fun. That is very listy. It's very linear in approach, like a line. So, like a checklist. When you're telling a story, it's good to pause, describe, give thoughts, etc. So that is the point of the lesson today. So, usually we get the question, how long does it need to be? We're proposing that you aim for 175, and there is a pattern to follow, like in most of your classes for most of your development questions. Here we get started with an opening sentence and making sure that we cover the 4 W's. We'll be looking at a couple of examples in a minute. Then from there you tell your story. You say that you got on a cruise, it was a nice big white ship, etc. You begin to tell your story. You get into it 2 or 3 lines, and at a certain particular point it's good to stop, pause, add a thought, a feeling, or a description. This is where the embellishment comes in. So instead of it being very scientific and very factual, this is where we get the artistic and the creative nature involved with the storytelling. Then you can continue your story. From there, you can talk about the buffet. Maybe you can talk about a thought or a feeling about the buffet or describe something in the buffet. And you repeat this process 3 or 4 or 5 times, however long you would like your story to be. The point being is every few lines, stop and add a thought, feeling, or a description. Then you close up and you say to end, to conclude, in brief. We need some kind of a transition word. Essentially, it's a signal light telling us what direction you are going. And then you simply recapitulate the general idea. This was the funnest trip ever, for example. Here are the challenges that we get with adding thoughts and feelings and descriptions. Usually it comes down to a vocabulary issue. So usually I get the comment from students, well, I want to use the word happy or sad or excited. But these are overused, especially the word excited. And happy and sad is grade 3 to grade 5 vocabulary. So we're looking for substitutes. So to make your life a little easier, we've done up a chart for grade 9 students at Mathieu. C'est un tableau. So in those columns you have substitutes. The top would be happy. And then underneath there the work has been done for you. You have a list from which you can choose and you pick the appropriate one. Another comment that we get, people are having trouble describing situations or describing an event or a memory. People tend to want to use good, bad, and interesting, but as we have already seen this semester, this is also grade 3 to grade 5 vocabulary, we would be looking for substitutes. Once again, a chart has been made up where you can go into the chart, into the columns, and you can have nice at the top, and underneath you have substitutes to describe people and events. Depending on the best one that you can choose, you try and choose the appropriate one for the story that you're telling. And last, people tend to forget that since you're telling a story, it needs to be sequenced in order of time. So you would say soon after, later, the following day, suddenly a man jumped out from the woods. Hours later, then my stomach turned and I vomited. So depending on how you are sequencing your story, not to forget these are other signal lights to guide the reader through the story. Now let's take a closer look at the introduction or topic sentence and the closing sentence. It's also called an introductory sentence. It's all the same thing. So if you say, there we go. If we say introductory, topic, or opening sentence, it all means the same thing. It's simply the introduction to get us going. In the middle here are the 4 W's. So essentially it's the who, what, when, where. The why, not necessarily. It depends on the story. But we do need these 4 W's covered. Here are 2 examples. We have one at the top and one at the bottom. In March 2010, that's your where. My family and I, that's your who, went to Florida, that's your where, for a trip. Some people assume as soon as we stop the sentence here that you wouldn't need to say for what, but it's possible you went there for a funeral. Here you could say 2 years ago, but if I read your story to my class in 5 years, if you say 2 years ago, all of a sudden the time frame is inaccurate. So if we follow this, this is what we're looking for. Another example at the bottom of the poster, I'm not sure if you can see. Oopsie. Yep, there we go. One weekend in the winter of 2006, my teammates and I competed in a squash tournament in Niguac, New Brunswick. So we have the 4 W's here that we're covering. All in all, by the time you get in a practice 1, a practice 2, after you get in a few practices and get some feedback, and you have a better grasp of what we're asking, in the end, the summative, this will be worth 10 points out of 100. A closing sentence as well is also worth 10 points, or it will be at the end when we get some practices in and you get that summative completed and finished up. Concluding sentence is the same thing as a closing sentence. In a closing sentence, if we look across the middle of the poster, this is where you have your requirements. You need a transition word, which is a signal light, so you need to end in brief, overall, in summary. Then wrapping up a general idea, or you can refer back to the opening sentence and talk about either a trip or a concert or whatever it is you're referring to. And this is optional here. We have a little red star. If you'd like to add an element of the future, I will never forget this trip, I will never forget this moment, you can do so, and that comes into personal style, where you can do this if you choose to. So we have an example at the top and an example at the bottom. In brief, my adventure in Tampa, Florida was definitely unforgettable. So we're assuming that this adventure was probably a family trip or a class outing of some kind. Another example on the bottom here. Overall, this intense moment was truly special and remarkable. So it's an overall general feeling of a goodbye. So we need some kind of an ending. This will eventually also be worth 10 on 100. At this point in time, you may choose to pause the video. This may be enough depending on how many times you've discussed this in class already. The last chunk of the video, what I'm going to do is read 2 samples or examples written from students past. These 2 paragraphs are in the 90s range. So at this point in time, if you would like to pause the video, I will say goodbye and thanks for listening. And this is the Pedagogical Capsule on Narrative Writing. If you have not pressed pause, I'm assuming that means now you're ready and willing to listen to 2 examples. The first one, the title is Shotgun. I only have it in written form. I'm only simply going to be reading it to you. It's the best I can do for today. Shotgun. In March 2012, my family and I went to Eastside Mario's in Moncton for a family supper. At the end of the night, after filling our bellies with an awesome meal, we were all done and heading home. Walking in the parking lot, my dad quickly told my brother he must sit in the back seat of our car while my mother drove us home. My brother and my father love sitting in the front seat, so when someone in the family says they're taking the front, we all sprint to the car and playfully fight to get to the front seat. The quickest and the cleverest open the door, jump in, and lock the door behind them. This particular time, my dad sprinted extra quickly and tackled my brother who was ahead of him, and they both landed against the car. I found this highly entertaining. And it seemed like my mother did too, since we both couldn't stop laughing at this friendly tussle. This wasn't unusual for the boys to do this, yet I couldn't help but laugh. Then I was filled with the urgent sense of mischief. So while they fought, I tiptoed quietly and circled around them to the front door in front of them. But they didn't seem to notice. I jumped in and locked the door. I stole the seat. It was such an intense moment for me, it gave me a thrill when I actually pressed the lock button from the inside of the SUV. I decided that no matter the consequence, no matter what kind of repercussion would come from this, it had all been worth it. Afterwards, on the ride home, we were all laughing terribly, minus my brother, who was poking me from the back seat, frustrated that I stole the seat from him. I must say, even if it's something very trivial, this was definitely one of my mischievous moments ever, and I hope to get another chance at doing this in the future. So this is very simple and to the point. We have thoughts and feelings. The opening and close is very good. It is not a list. Just seventh best. One moment that stands out in my life is back in 2005 when I competed in a provincial spelling bee in St. John, New Brunswick. During the drive up, I was extremely nervous. It felt like the car ride would never end. When we finally arrived at the place where the spelling bee would be held, I actually was physically shaking. There were so many people there. I couldn't believe I was about to compete against such a large number of students in front of an audience of 600 people. Thoughts began racing through my mind. What if they're smarter than me? What if I'm the first eliminated? I had been practicing for months, but now I wasn't sure it was enough. Finally, the competition had begun. I watched nervously as child after child was eliminated. The disappointed looks on their faces will forever be in my mind. Every time I got up to spell a word, my heart pounded in my chest. There were only 7 of the original 50 contestants left, and I was one of them. It was my turn. I rose from my chair and walked up to the microphone. "Heirloom," the judges said. "I've got this in the bag," I thought. So I began to spell. Heirloom. I had said the last 3 letters so quickly the judges didn't hear both O's, so I was eliminated. I was upset at first, but then I realized that even though I didn't win, I was the 7th best speller in all of the province of New Brunswick. In the end, I was super proud of what I had accomplished, and to this day, this is still one very special moment for me. So I would say this second one has more thoughts, and I would say the first one, Shotgun, has probably more feelings. And that is one approach. I mean, there should be some kind of personal style involved with all of this, and it should be somewhat fun. We know that you've been telling stories for a while, and now it's time to up the ante, follow the pattern, making sure that you tell a story and that you take a pause and you have a thought, a feeling, or a description at least 3 or 4 times during the entire paragraph. To finish, this is the pedagogical capsule for narrative writing. Thank you.